The Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Dr. Fuad Khan, MP, member for Barataria Sanwan, Dr. Lakram Bodo, MP, member for Faizabad, and Mr. Prakash Ramada, MP, member for St. Augustine, have asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the audited financial statements of the University of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ended September 30th, 2014, and I beg to move that this paper be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 2, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Paper number 3, the response of the Personnel Department to the 3rd report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. Paper number 4, the response of the Personnel Department to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the annual administrative report of the former Ministry of Community Development for fiscal year 2014-2015.
The Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, I have the honor to lay paper number 6, the annual report of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago for the year 2015 to 2016.
The Minister of Trade and Industry.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Trade and Industry, I have the honor to lay paper number 7, the annual administrative report of the Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited for the year ended September 30th, 2015. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, I have the honor to lay paper number 8, the administrative report of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs, as it then was, for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2015. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees. Prime Minister's questions. Urgent questions.
Member for Oropuch East.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can the Minister, to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Can the minister indicate the reason or reasons for the sudden resignation of Petrotrin's president, Fitzroy Harewood?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on 2017, November 30th, Mr. Fitzroy Harewood submitted his resignation to the chairman of the board of Petrotrin, giving the company 3 months' notice, making his effective date of resignation February 28, 2018. Madam President, the president of Petrotrin resigned for personal reasons.
Supplemental, member for Urupuchis.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister, this is supplemental to you. Given the sensitive nature of the office of president of Petrotrin and the current ongoing investigations into the fake oil scandal, do you think it is prudent that this president should occupy the office until February 28 next year?
I'm not going to allow that as supplemental question. Member for Urupuch is supplemental.
Thank you. Minister, given resignations before from Trevor Lynch, CPEP, Denise Demin, TDC, Christine Sahadeo, the Port, Arnold Pigot, Education, and now the president, do you think this is a sign of some deeper problem in the state sector?
I'm not going to allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Urupuch East.
To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Thank you. Could the minister confirm whether or not one of Petrotrin's employees named in the fake oil scandal, Vidya Duki Singh, is back at his job at Petrotrin?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Mr. Vidya Duki Singh returned to Petrotrin on December 6, 2017, and is now the subject of the company's disciplinary proceedings.
Supplemental, member for Urupuch East.
Could I ask the minister, and thank you for the thing, is it prudent that the person, Mr. Duki Singh, should be back at the job at Petrotrin while the subject of an investigation by Petrotrin on this very critical matter?
I'm not going to allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Urupuch is supplemental.
Thank you very much. Could the minister indicate on this fake oil matter whether this matter has been referred to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
The matter is under the purview of the board of Petrotrin, and it has not been referred officially to the police.
Member for Urupuch East. New question.
To the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. Yes. Can the minister indicate whether he is receiving or has ever received a housing allowance while in occupation of government housing?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, based on a response to a question asked in the other place and based on a newspaper report, it is public knowledge that I was erroneously paid a housing allowance and promptly repaid that amount to the Comptroller of Accounts. Thank you.
Supplemental, member for Urupuch East.
Thank you very much, Minister. In light of the erroneous payment to you, could you indicate how much extra monies were deposited into your account and whether you discovered this yourself or was alerted by the ministry?
All right. So it's one question. I will allow the first question.
Madam Speaker, I alerted the ministry of the erroneous payment when it was made.
Member for Urupuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of National Security. In relation to the recent robbery at the Piaco International Airport, can the Minister indicate what measures will be implemented to secure customers utilizing the facility, as well as the goods and other equipment that would be shipped?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while there are several measures being adopted, such as providing additional training to airport security personnel, improving liaison operational support between airport security personnel, Tobago police elements, customs and excise, and quick response mechanism involving the police, defense force, air guard, land support, that is, Strategic Services Agency. Also, an analysis and improvement of CCTV coverage and monitoring across agencies. The real issue, Madam Speaker, is the root cause of this incident was a gang-related activity, which was in fact told by the Attorney General to a member of Oropouche West. Gang-related, superior in fact, superior, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, why gang-related? There were illegal guns, more than one person involved. When you look at the bill that's proposed, Madam Speaker, this first schedule, possession of bulletproof vests, firearms, ammunition, prohibited weapons for beneficiation of gang, demanding money with menace, robbery, robbery with aggravation, robbery with violence, possession and use of firearms and ammunition with intent to endanger life. These were the issues, Madam Speaker, in terms of the anti-gang bill that they did not support. How can they come now today and ask this kind of questions, Madam Speaker, when they did not support the bill that is in fact a gang-related activity that we are treating with?
Supplemental, member for Oropouche East.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, a question to the animated Minister of National Security. If the minister will calm himself down. Madam Speaker, could I ask the minister?
Please, we're very early in the proceedings. I'm not going to allow any personal reflections. You can ask your question, you have 15 seconds.
Madam, with the same animation I will ask. Is the minister aware of a recent change at private security at the Airports Authority, where a private security company is linked to a government member? And was that change a result of this?
Member, I'm not going to allow that. As supplemental, member for Oropouche West. Supplemental.
Supplemental, Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, would you deem it as a lapse in security?
Madam Speaker, I deem it as a gang-related activity.
I guess the member for Couva South, it's most probably how you're sitting that you don't see me on my legs. Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
In light of the recent reports indicating the street vending is now permissible in San Fernando, can the Minister indicate what measures are in place to ensure the safety of pedestrians and customers?
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question. On behalf of the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, the Mayor and administration for the City of San Fernando met with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the San Fernando Municipal Police to discuss the decision to move street vendors to a designated area within the city. This area was deemed to have the appropriate space to ensure safe pedestrian traffic concurrent with the street vending. These are the same vendors who have been present in the city for more than 30 years. However, in an effort to regularize this practice, they are now being asked to use this designated area. To ensure the safety of all persons, pedestrians, customers, and vendors in this zone of the city, both the TTPS and the municipal police have increased foot and vehicular patrols. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Princestown Supplemental.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, in light of the answer that you just provided, with respect to the municipal police that will be assisting in that regard, can you say out of the 100 municipal officers that were promised to every regional corporation, how many exist at San Fernando out of that 100?
I do not know. My point precisely.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, we will be answering all questions for oral answer, and there are no questions for written answer.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, question number 42.
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance is currently exploring all available options for the smooth transitioning of employees from the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division to the proposed Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. Discussions with the Public Service Association are ongoing, but no formal agreement has been reached with the Public Service Association at this time.
Supplemental, member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the Minister give a firm commitment to all of the employees of the Board of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise that there will be no job loss in terms of the transitioning between the Board of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise and into the new entity?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As is public knowledge, the government has made it very clear that employees in these two departments, the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division, will have three options available to them, one of which would be transfer to the proposed Revenue Authority, and all of the current employees of the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division will have the option to transfer to the proposed authority, every single one.
Supplemental, member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Ministry of Finance be facilitating successorship from a recognized majority union status point of view into the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority?
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, that matter forms part of current ongoing discussions with the Public Service Association, and that matter has not reached its final resolution yet.
Supplemental, member for Caroni East.
Bearing in mind that some might transfer and some might elect to stay, what would be the conditions of employment for those who elect to stay when the Revenue Authority is full scale?
Member for Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As is public knowledge, there are three options. I mentioned one option in response to the query from the member for Couva South. The other two options are remain in the public service, and the third option is retire from the public service. They're all voluntary options, the other two. So transfer, remain, or retire.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 43 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ministries and departments have the responsibility to effect payments to their employees once the funds have been released by the Ministry of Finance. In an effort to improve the efficiency of the application process to release funds and to prevent delays in the payment of salaries, wages, and other expenditure, Ministry and departments are given deadlines for submitting requests for releases to the Budget Division of the Ministry of Finance. The deadline to submit requests for releases to meet expenditure for the period October to December 2017 has passed, and all ministries and departments have successfully submitted their relevant requests for releases. The ministry is also cognizant of the fact that ministries and departments, as well as commercial banks, would also require time to facilitate their own administrative processes. Accordingly, the ministry grants approval for the release of funds to meet the payment of salaries and wages within a reasonable time frame to allow for all the administrative processes to be completed, barring unforeseen circumstances.
Supplemental member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Having listened to the Minister of Finance, is the Minister of Finance aware that salary deductions in his capacity as corporation sole also? Is he aware, for example, that in today's Guardian there was a headline, MTS cites cash flow woes as it relates to workers' salaries deductions not being paid?
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I'm afraid I was so busy today, I have not yet read the Guardian newspaper. However, I will endeavor to do so during a period of this debate. But the question that was asked relates to workers in the public sector, municipal corporations, not state enterprise sector. But I will certainly look into that matter and take whatever corrective action needs to be taken.
Member for Oropuch West.
Madam Speaker, question number 45 to Minister of Health.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Oropuch West for the question. Some nurses received salary payments in October 2017, just 1 day after the scheduled pay date, 1 day, due to unavoidable delays in the printing of checks. However, most nurses received payments on time. Answer to Part B, barring unforeseen circumstances, it is anticipated that salary payments for the remainder of this fiscal year will be made by the scheduled pay dates. Thank you very much.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 46 to the Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Minister of Social Development and Family Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, perceptions that the homeless population is spiraling is not supported by the relevant research done in the area. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services conducts street counts as far as possible at least once per year in our major cities and towns. A review of the street count statistics shows that between 2015 and 2016, there was an increase of 17 persons in the street dweller population in Trinidad. Notably, the number in Port of Spain showed a small decrease of 3 persons. The ministry conducted its most recent street count in November 2017, and the team is finalizing the compilation of the results. This exercise will bring some currency to the data available on this social phenomenon. Notwithstanding, the ministry has made significant investment to ensure that provisions are made for the care and well-being of this population. The ministry provides subventions to 2 NGOs for the management and operations of shelters. The Center for Socially Displaced Persons, or CSDP, in Port of Spain, operated by the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, and the CSDP in San Fernando, operated by Court Shamrock. The Port of Spain location has a capacity for 200 persons, while the center in San Fernando accommodates 78 persons. A subvention is paid to Nazareth House of the St. Vincent de Paul Society to provide accommodation and other support services to mentally ill, socially displaced persons. Accommodation and care are also provided through 3 other facilities operated by St. Vincent de Paul, the Salvation Army, and 2 privately owned facilities. Those are West Coast Villas and Shalom Senior Citizens Home. Additionally, provisions are made under the community care program to prevent socially displaced persons in the various hospitals from moving to the streets. Currently, 60 such persons are provided with accommodation and care at several privately operated geriatric homes across the country. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services also operates 2 facilities where housing and other support services are provided for this population. Hernandez Place in Arima has a capacity of 17, while New Horizons in Piparo has a capacity for 80 persons. These facilities currently house 40 persons. The ministry recognizes that the issue of street dwelling is complex and multidimensional in nature and will be best addressed using a multi-sectoral approach. a multidisciplinary committee with representation from the public and private sector was therefore appointed to examine in greater detail the street dwelling situation and to identify and make recommendations for addressing the issue. The recommendations of the committee was agreed to by Cabinet in August 2017 and included establishment of shelters in major cities and towns, establishment of a street dweller assessment center, provision of transitional housing, hostel accommodation in collaboration with the NGO sector, and expansion of the community care program to establish or identify suitable accommodation options for persons 18 to 54 years of age who are unable to maintain themselves or have no means of subsistence or place of residence. The implementation of the aforementioned will result in increased accommodation for the homeless. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 47 to the Minister of Trade and Industry.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Minister of Trade and Industry, the live music district to be launched by the Trinidad and Tobago Music Company, Music TT, in 2018 is projected to cost $250,000. The specific areas of expenditure are as follows. Assessment and engagement of potential venues, $15,000. Development of potential business models, $100,000. Marketing and communications campaign, $85,000. Monitoring and evaluation of phase 1 of the live music district, $25,000. The anticipated returns on the implementation of the live music district are as follows. Increased opportunities for artists to develop their stage performance skills in preparation for larger audiences outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Easier access to investors who have more opportunities to view artists' live performances. Increased economic activity in the city of Port of Spain and its environs. Increased employment opportunities resulting from entertainment venues boosting their capacity in order to sustain greater patronage. Increased international visitor arrivals to the live music district and Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. This project, Madam Speaker, will provide a commercially viable business model which will allow future artists to be fairly remunerated for their services. And Madam Speaker, I'd just like to add that this project, at the cost of $250,000 for all of these potential returns, would be much cheaper than the $5 million that was paid to one artist by the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development as it then was.
Supplemental question for member for Oropouche West.
Don't like Marshall?
Minister, what is the plan
Marshall.
for monetizing intellectual property since there might be rebranding of the music?
I'm not going to allow that as a supplemental question.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers, personal explanations.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I wish to thank you for granting me leave to make the following personal explanation pursuant to Standing Order 23. Madam Speaker, following the debate on the Anti-Gang Bill 2017, which commenced on Wednesday, 6th December, and ended in the early hours of Thursday, 7th December, several comments and statements have been made in daily newspapers, on the radio and television stations, in relation to my participation during the committee stage of the bill. Madam Speaker, in my 31 years as a parliamentarian, I have never experienced the manner of objectionable and vile attack such as the one that I am now being subjected to. Members of Parliament, my very own colleagues, led by the Leader of the Opposition, herself a former Prime Minister, have engaged in an orchestrated course of malicious character assassination against me. by seriously misrepresenting events which occurred in this House earlier this week. Madam Speaker, I feel...
Point of order. It says no controversial matter may be brought forward.
I rule against you, a member for Caroni East. I'd just like you to know that your statements are reaching my ear. And if one reads Standing Order 23 properly, you would see that the chair has granted leave. Please continue, Member for.
You have to get leave.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the granting of this leave. Madam Speaker, I feel personally affronted and offended because as Prime Minister of this country, I extended myself and made a very concerted effort to ensure that this government reach across the aisle to give serious consideration to the concerns of the opposition on this particular bill. As some of you may be now aware, the anti-gang bill sought to address serious challenges faced by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in treating with the problem of organized crime in this country. What compounds the offensiveness of this matter is the fact that the person at the helm of this most abominable and contemptible attack on both myself as well as on the records of this House once held the office I now hold, and like me, is a long-standing member of this House.
Which one?
Member, what objection are you raising?
Madam Speaker, could you please interpret for me what no controversial...
Member, as I've said, I have ruled and allowed it.
Madam Speaker, I have listened very closely to the comments and statements being made, and I have been forced to ask myself, why is this sustained effort being made to misrepresent what I said and did during the consideration of this bill? Upon reflection, the only conclusion that I have been able to arrive at is that the intended effects is to damage me personally as a Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West and as Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, I categorically reject any assertion or suggestion that I refused to negotiate or was uncooperative during deliberations of the anti-gang bill. In the final analysis, Madam Speaker, the anti-gang bill was first read and introduced in this House and was substantially amended to give effect to the many requests made by the opposition. During the consideration of the bill, several issues were discussed and compromises reached. In fact, the inclusion of a sunset clause as a proposed government amendment was a result of my own initiative. Madam Speaker, the amendment was included after I listened to the opposition's view on the issue, held discussions with the drafters and members of the government's bench, and more particularly, made a personal intervention with the opposition chief whip, the member for Pointe-à-Pierre, when we met at my request behind the Speaker's chair. In keeping with the established procedures and the standing orders, after exhaustive discussions and the exchange of ideas on the duration of the sunset clause, which I insisted should be inserted in the bill to give effect to the opposition's concerns, the question on the inclusion of a sunset clause for a period of 4 years was put. Absolutely no member of the opposition voted no against the proposals as this specific clause was put. Madam Speaker, I have served in opposition for 14 years, and it has been my experience and understanding that when an opposition feels strongly about any particular issue, the consideration taking place on a bill in committee, they will usually register their disagreement when the question is put on the particular issue. This did not happen on this occasion. The official report of the debates held in this House, otherwise called Hansard, provides a clear and faithful transcription of words spoken during the proceedings. The Hansard ensures that democracy is accessible and transparent. Via the Hansard, any citizen has the opportunity to inform himself about decisions made by the Parliament and to verify the records to see what was said about any bill or issue by every single member of Parliament. In this case, Madam Speaker, the Hansard record will clearly show that the question for the inclusion of a new sunset clause was put to all members of this Honourable House 3 times.
Correct.
And on each occasion, there was not one single dissenting voice. So it is indeed shocking to hear the Leader of the Opposition, who led her members to vote against the bill, thereby defeating it, now seeking to defend her actions by claiming that this position was motivated by my refusal to include a sunset clause in the bill. Madam Speaker, we call each other in this House honourable. So for members of this House to misrepresent me with respect to the proceedings of this House is an act that goes beneath the dignity expected of this Honourable House and of honourable members. I therefore invite those who have heard the reflections made on my words and actions during committee stage on the Anti-Gang Bill 2017 to evaluate the events on the basis of the records of Hansard, since the Hansard is where the only truth resides. Right. Madam Speaker, I wish to conclude by expressing my deepest disappointment that the Leader of the Opposition and any other member opposite is capable of engaging in such reprehensible conduct, which is in essence a misrepresentation of the Hansard record, the official record of what is said and done in this House. One would assume that members would appreciate, through their own experience, honesty, and integrity, the effect that this course of action would have. However, having made this personal explanation, I now leave it for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to read the Hansard and view the footage of the debate to arrive at the true position. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister. Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Minister of Finance.
Take that responsibility.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Variation of Certain Duties and Taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, before the House this afternoon is the Finance Bill 2017, which is aimed at putting in place fiscal measures and matters related thereto, which were announced in this House during the budget statement on October the 2nd, 2017. There are other matters, Madam Speaker, that were not mentioned on the day that the budget statement was presented, but these matters also go towards many of the mechanisms required for the implementation of the plans outlined in the 2017 budget, Madam Speaker. Allow me to give you a quick overview of the 2018 budget measures. On October the 2nd, the prices for petroleum products and the gross margin related to those products were increased by way of an order. On October 23rd, 2017, the Provisional Collection of Taxes Order 2017 was put into effect. The resolution to confirm the measures contained in that order, the Provisional Collection of Taxes Order, was passed on November the 10th, 2017 in this House. In those documents and in that debate, I dealt with taxes and duties for the gaming and gambling industry, taxes and duties for the alternative fuel technology, relating to hybrid, electric, and compressed natural gas or CNG vehicles. And incentives were also put in place to make motorcycles of a particular size more affordable to persons who are likely to purchase this type of motorcycle, 300 cc's and below. The provisional collection of taxes also dealt with the harmonization of customs duty relating to tires. And the reason for that at the time was that the rate of duty on new tires is of the order of 30%, whereas the rate of duty on used tires is 5%. And there was some significant cheating taking place where persons were importing new tires and declaring them to be used tires, thereby avoiding 25% in customs duty. So we felt in order to take away the opportunity for tax evasion and cheating, we would simply harmonize the duties relating to taxes. Additionally, we decided to increase a long overdue increase in inspection fees to be paid by registered owners of private motor vehicles and motorcycles 5 years old or more when produced for inspection by an examiner. These fees had been in place for many, many years, Madam Speaker. In fact, if my memory serves me correctly, these fees had been in place for virtually 20 years and had been set at $165 for that period. We have increased that to $300 to give more revenue to the examination stations who felt they just could not survive on their share of that $165 because they only got part of it. And the new inspection fees for motor cars, motor vehicles, was put in place by way of an order earlier in December this month, 2017. That will be an order issued by the Minister of Works and Transport. Allow me now to just deal with the finance bill itself. Clause 1 of the bill is self-explanatory. It simply is the title. Clause 2 deals with commencement provisions. The vast majority of the measures will take effect on the 1st of January 2018, with the exception of one measure, which is the measure for the imposition of the lottery winnings tax. And when I come to that clause in the bill, I will explain why we have put a commencement provision for the lottery winnings tax. In fact, if I read clause 2, it states that sections 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10 will come into operation on 1st of January 2018, but section 9A comes into operation on such day as is fixed by the President for proclamation. So that day will be established in the future, and at that time, the lottery winnings tax will take effect. Clause 3 deals with private hospitals, and we have amended the Private Hospitals Act in section 29, or is seeking to amend it in section 29A by deleting the words 10,000 and substituting the words 100,000. And that 10,000 was the license fee for private hospitals. The annual fee, believe it or not, Madam Speaker, was just $10,000. So we have increased that to $100,000. And in the second part of this amendment, we have changed the daily fine from $200 to $1,500 for persons who continue with the offense. But let me move straight to the lottery winnings tax. I saw some speculation in the media recently, and in fact I had cause to explain to a media house what we were doing with respect to the lottery winnings tax, because there was a statement in the budget that this would take effect on the 1st of December. So on the 1st of December, arms of the media went to speak to lottery vendors and discovered that the tax was not yet in effect, and then began to make a story out of it. But they had, I'm struggling with a word here, but they had the foresight to call me to ask me what was going on. And I will explain that shortly. I would like to say the imposition of a tax on lottery winnings is not a novel or unique idea. In Jamaica, for example, Madam Speaker, a tax is imposed on all lottery winnings in excess of 15,000 Jamaica dollars. Now that may seem like a lot, but Madam Speaker, 15,000 Jamaica dollars is just 810 Trinidad and Tobago dollars. So that as you go along, you will see that we are imposing the tax on winnings in excess of $1,000. So we are similar to Jamaica, but in fact, yeah, $1,000. All winnings above $1,000 will be subject to the 10% lottery winnings tax. In Jamaica, they impose a tax on all lottery winnings above the equivalent of 810 Trinidad and Tobago dollars. So our position and the Jamaican position is almost identical. Madam Speaker, in Jamaica, they also impose taxes. It's not just that they have a threshold for the amount of the prize winning on which a tax is imposed. Once you cross 810 equivalent TT dollars in Jamaica, a tax is imposed. But their tax is very different to ours. The tax rates range from 20% to 25% on games like Cash Pot, Lucky 5, Pick 2, Pick 3, Pick 4, instant games, Super Lotto, Dollars, Lotto, Money Time, and Top Draw. So in Jamaica, once the prize exceeds $810, the tax rates range from 20% to 25% on a variety of different games that they have in Jamaica, just like ours. Pick 2, Pick 3, which is the equivalent of the playway and all that sort of thing. So that our tax regime of 10% on lottery winnings in excess of 1,000 Trinidad and Tobago dollars is in fact far softer than the taxation regime in Jamaica, where the tax is on all of their games range from 20% to 25%. We're imposing 10%. In Florida, a 25% federal withholding tax is applied on prizes greater than $5,000 if the winner is a citizen or resident of the United States. Additionally, a 28% federal withholding tax is applied to winnings in excess of $600 where the winner does not have a social security number. A 30% tax rate is applied in Florida on all lottery prizes in circumstances where the person is neither a citizen nor a resident of the United States. In the bill, Madam Speaker, section, just let me get to it, section 22B. Section 22A is simply definitions. The board is the board of the national lotteries. National lottery is what is defined in the Lotteries Act, and the tax authority is the Board of Inland Revenue. 22B in the bill, a tax to be called a lottery winnings tax shall be charged on all prize money paid out in respect of any paper, ticket, or token sold that is in excess of $1,000. And this creates the tax called a lottery winnings tax. In 22C, it confirms that the rate will be 10%. 22B gives you the threshold that the tax is charged on any winnings in excess of $1,000, and 22C indicates the rate shall be 10% in comparison to Jamaica with its 25% and Florida with its 30%. In 22D, Madam Speaker, it is clear that the board, the National Lotteries Control Board, and its agents will be responsible for withholding the lottery winnings tax before the payment of any prize money. However, it is only the National Lotteries Control Board that will be responsible for paying over the tax to the government that is withheld by it or any of its agents, with paying it over to the Board of Inland Revenue. The national lotteries must pay the tax, or pay over the tax, on or before the 15th day of the following month in which its agents withheld the tax. And there are standard provisions which are already in the tax laws, that the failure by the National Lotteries Control Board and its agents to withhold the tax will attract a 25% penalty and interest. However, since there will always be situations where there are mitigating circumstances, at Section 22F of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act, the President, which would be the Cabinet, may remit or refund lottery winnings tax to the board or any penalty associated with the non-payment of lottery winnings tax if the tax authority is satisfied that it will be just and equitable to do so. So if, for example, there's a technology failure, breakdown in the National Lottery's computer systems, and they were unable to pay the tax on the 15th day after, the month after, that would be justification for the Cabinet to remit or refund any tax or any penalty, any interest or penalty on late payments of the lottery winnings tax. In Section 22G of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act, the Board of Inland Revenue may at any time audit the National Lotteries Control Board to ensure that it has received the correct lottery winnings taxes from the National Lotteries Control Board. And the BIR can, in the respect of the collection and recovery of the lottery winnings tax and an audit of the National Lotteries Control Board, have all the powers which it has in relation to income tax under the Income Tax Act. Now, let's come to the point I made earlier. I have been advised, and it does have merit, that it will take the National Lotteries Control Board some time, and in particular their vendors, some time to get accustomed to the new regime of withholding taxes on lottery winnings. And therefore, we have decided, since it will take them some time, we have the commencement clause in the bill which allows that this particular provision, these provisions, will come into operation on such day as is fixed by the President by proclamation. We are targeting early in 2018, the calendar year, for the proclamation of these sections that would initiate the process of collection of the lottery winnings tax by the National Lotteries Control Board and the payment over to the Board of Inland Revenue, as well as the proper education and training of vendors in terms of the remittance of this tax to the National Lotteries Control Board for onward payment to the Board of Inland Revenue. And that is the reason why this tax did not take effect on the 1st of December. We felt all of the players, all of the stakeholders, all of the vendors needed some time to acclimatize to the new system. The next matter in the bill that I would like to address is the environmental tire tax. And the environmental tire tax, a new section, Section 27C of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act, will provide that the tax authority in this particular case would be the controller of customs and excise. You can have different tax authorities. Section 27D, the new proposed Section 27D of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act, creates this tax called the Environmental Tire Tax. And this tax will be in the amount of $20 per tire. The tax will be charged on tires imported into Trinidad and Tobago under tariff headings 4012.20.10, 4012.20.90, and 4012.20.00. And the tax is payable by the importer of the tire at the port to the Controller of Customs and Excise. Now, you may wonder why I took the time to read out the tariff numbers. The explanation is that we did not want to create any confusion with respect to tires used on agricultural tractors and things of that nature. This tax is primarily intended at the main users of tires, main importers of tires, tires for passenger vehicles and so on. So we are making it specific to these tariff numbers to avoid any ambiguity as to which tires would attract this tax and which would not. Of course, it creates challenges for enforcement. I could see somebody bringing in tires for a passenger car and saying it's a tire for an agricultural tractor, but we will deal with that on a case-by-case basis because there are not many imports along those lines. But we felt we would just deal with the main offenders, and all of us will know, all of us who have constituencies, and that is everybody inside of here. You will see how people dump tires on the side of roads, in forested areas, in streams, in ravines, and just dump it all over the place. So apart from creating an eyesore and creating a garbage dump, it also breeds Aedes aegypti mosquito and creates all sorts of hazards and problems. So we are going to get involved in the retrieval and disposal of these tires, and this tax will be used for that in the future. In fact, the members of the private sector have approached the government, and they wish to get into a public-private partnership with respect to the disposal and the possible recycling of tires. There are some parts of tires that can be easily recycled, others not so easy, but the private sector has approached us, and this tax would be applied to that activity once all the issues surrounding the partnership between the private sector and the government are resolved. This $20 tax will be used to cover the cost of their operations in the collection, disposal, and recycling of tires, and it will assist in no small measure in dealing with this scourge which we are subject to at this point in time. Another provision amends or introduces Section 27E of the Miscellaneous Taxes Act and provides that the Controller of Customs and Excise may exercise the powers given for the collection, enforcement, and management of duty under the Customs Act and any other written law in respect of this environmental tire tax. And again, the power of the President, the Cabinet, to remit or refund duty with respect to this tax will apply mutatis mutandis to the environmental tire tax, and this is found at Section 27F of the Act. This tax will come into force on the date of assent of this legislation before us, which has to go to the other place. So it will come into force, I would say, within the next week or so, the environmental tire tax. Part 6 of the bill deals with the imposition of corporation tax. In January 2017, actually on January 1st, a dual tax rate per annum was introduced on the chargeable profits of companies that are liable to tax. A tax rate of 25% before the passage of this legislation is now applied to every dollar of the first $1 million of chargeable profits of companies. A tax rate of 30% is charged on every dollar above the first $1 million. That measure, also known as the Millionaire Tax, was introduced in an effort to deal with the significant financial challenges that the government faces in terms of bridging the gap between expenditure and revenue due to the calamitous fall in petroleum prices and also the significant decline in production of oil and gas in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, even though in recent times the price of oil has crossed $50, I think when I checked today it was about 57. $57 is still a severely depressed oil price when you consider that the average, and I'm talking about West Texas Intermediate, Brent would be 63 or somewhere around there. But we use West Texas Intermediate as our benchmark crude oil in Trinidad and Tobago for budgetary purposes. And even though the price of WTI is $57 as we speak today, it is still way below the average oil price enjoyed over the 2010 to 2015 period, which was close to $100 per barrel. The price of natural gas as well continues to be severely depressed and way below the prices enjoyed over the 2010 to 2015 period. And I'm speaking about the prices that were obtained in markets outside of North America, markets that our liquefied natural gas was going to, such as South America to Chile and so on, and Europe to Spain and other countries in Europe, and also to the Far East, to Japan and so on. During the 2010 to 2015 period, our LNG fetched prices up to $20 per MMBTU, Madam Speaker. That sort of price regime no longer exists, and now you're getting $7, $8 in the Far East, $5, $6 in Chile, and $3 or less in North America. So that oil prices are still significantly down, oil production is significantly down, and gas prices are severely down, and also gas production is down. So that the challenge to bridge the gap between revenue and expenditure remains, so that we decided to harmonize and to make the tax on companies 30% across the board. And this measure is found at clause 7A of the bill, and that it will take effect from the 1st of January 2018, because that is the usual manner in which income tax is imposed in Trinidad and Tobago. It is usually imposed from the 1st of January of every year. And this is all part, and this is all part of sharing the burden of adjustment, Madam Speaker. Because everybody in Trinidad and Tobago, whether you are rich or not so rich, we are calling upon everybody, the wealthy in particular, to share the burden of adjustment. So this 30% on corporations is part of the sharing of the burden of adjustment. And I now come to another measure designed for even more sharing of the burden of adjustment. Madam Speaker, if you look at the Financial Stability Report for the year 2016, prepared by the Central Bank for the banking sector, you will see that the banking sector, which comprises commercial banks and non-bank financial institutions, generated approximately $4.2 billion in profit for the year 2016. Let me repeat that. The banking sector generated $4.2 billion for the year 2016 in profits. This was an increase from the profits that they generated in the year 2015. So while oil prices are going down, tax collections are going down, oil production is going down, gas prices are going down, natural gas prices, and natural gas production is going down, bank profits were going up.
In the past month, 2 of them declared record profits.
Yes, and as my colleague to my right has reminded me, in the last month, 2 of our premier banks have declared record profits in this period of recession. Yes, it's good. It's good from a commercial point of view, but there's no gainsaying the fact that the banks are making super profits. And we felt in terms of sharing the burden of adjustment, that since the banks are making billions of dollars in profits per annum, we would impose a special tax on banks of 35%. How much more time? 252. Oh, right, good. I'm just checking. The corporation tax measures, the harmonization of corporation tax for companies to 30% for all income, including income below $1 million, will come into effect on the 1st of January, and the increase in the tax rate for commercial banks will come into effect. The 35% rate will come into effect on January 1st. Madam Speaker, let me just deal with an issue that perhaps I should have dealt with as I was going in sequence. In Part 4 of the bill, on page 4, Clause 5, there were proposed amendments to the Maxi Taxi Act, which would have removed the power of the Minister of Transport to set limits on the number of maxi taxis in any particular band or in any particular region or district in Trinidad and Tobago. So in the Maxi Taxi Act at this point in time, the minister with responsibility for transport has the power to limit the number of maxi taxis, whether it's yellow band or red band, in a particular route. That is contained in the Maxi Taxi Act at this point in time. And the effect of Clause 5 of this bill would have been to take that power away from the minister. But, Madam Speaker, based on discussions with the Maxi Taxi associations and Maxi Taxi owners, we have decided that discussions and consultations will continue, and we are not, therefore, going to implement this particular measure at this point in time. So at the appropriate stage, I will be moving an amendment to delete Clause 5 of this bill so that the proposed measures with respect to removing the minister's power to limit the number of maxi taxis on any particular route will not be affected by this bill. They are going to be deleted from this bill, and that will be addressed at a later date, some point in time in the future, after further consultation and discussions with maxi taxi associations and maxi taxi owners. I just want to make it clear, we're deleting Clause 5, so we will not be affecting the current power of the minister to limit the number of maxis in any particular route. Madam Speaker, let me move on now. With respect to central bank advances to the government, the Exchequer Account, Madam Speaker, the government's current and main account, it is no secret that this account has been very close to the allowable overdraft limit on virtually a daily basis since September 2015. In fact, as I've said before, and I will say again, within a couple of days of being appointed Minister of Finance in September 2015, I was visited by the then Governor of the Central Bank, who told me that the overdraft was so close to the limit that there was only enough money to run the country for about 2 days. So that, Madam Speaker, from September 2015 to now, this is more than 2 years, we have been operating this overdraft limit very close to the maximum on a virtually daily basis. It's been very, very, very challenging. And you know, Madam Speaker, it's a complete,
and that is causing some of the delays.
A complete paradigm shift for everybody in the system. And that is what is causing some of the issues. The Minister of Health told you that in October, some nurses in the health sector, some, not all, got their salary 1 day late. So if they were supposed to get it on the 29th of October, they got it on the 30th of October. And that was because of the fact that we were so close to the overdraft limit that we had to make adjustments to ensure that releases could be sent to the Ministry of Health and the appropriate credit received from the Treasury and the Central Bank to ensure that when the Ministry of Health sent the check payments to the RHAs, and then the RHAs sent this money to their employees, that the checks would be honored. And that was one of the reasons why we had a one-day delay in October for some of the nurses in the health sector. And that's because we've been managing this overdraft on a daily basis, almost close to limit. I looked at it this morning, and it was 97%. We had 3% left in the overdraft at the central bank. 3%, Madam Speaker, which runs the country for about 2 days. So that we have had a very, very difficult job in terms of managing the country's finances. The overdraft is prescribed by Section 46 of the Central Bank Act, Chapter 7902, and it allows the central bank to make temporary advances to the government on such terms and conditions as may be agreed upon between the bank and the Minister of Finance. The Act provides that the total amount of these advances made under this section must not at any time exceed 15% of the estimates of annual revenue of the government for the financial year in which these advances are made. The annual revenue is what is stated in the annual budget exercise, comprising the total of recurrent revenue and capital revenue, exclusive of loan funding. And the overdraft has, on a previous occasion, reached as high as 99.9% of the legal limit. There was a time in the last 12 months where we hit the limit. We had to stop. We had to stop writing checks in the government system, but we managed. We managed. On that occasion, we were fortunate, according to the rules, to be able to withdraw from the stabilization fund in order to manage that particular situation. But, Madam Speaker, we can't continue like this. It has been very difficult, and we can't run a country like this. And given the likelihood of shortfalls in revenue inflows in the short term, because we do expect to start turning the corner towards the end of this fiscal year, it is imperative that the government has the option to meet any unforeseen cash flow constraint that may arise during the fiscal year in a timely manner. We have therefore proposed, in fact, this matter was approved by Cabinet almost 2 years ago, at the same time that I took a submission to Cabinet to improve the limits on the debt ceilings. We also took a proposal to increase the overdraft limit from 15% to 20%, and we have now decided that it is time to implement that so that we can avoid disruptions to the government's fiscal operations, and that people can receive their salaries, their wages, their pensions, their social welfare benefits, and so on. Clause 11 under Part 10 of this bill addresses this matter and will come into operation on the assent of this Act within the next week or so. I would also like to indicate, Madam Speaker, I will be moving an amendment to increase the limit of treasury bills that can be issued for financing government operations. And let me explain why. I was recently visited by some consultants because we have been availing ourselves of the best possible advice from all corners of the world. So we reached out to the Commonwealth Debt Management Unit. They have a very sophisticated unit in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And we have consultants here right now as we speak from the Commonwealth Secretariat Debt Management Unit. They provide technical advice to countries around the world in terms of debt management. And they pointed out to us that the overdraft at the central bank is subject to an interest penalty of equivalent to the repo rate. The repo rate is what banks charge, the central bank charges banks for money. It's currently 4.75%. And therefore, whenever the government is in overdraft, the central bank charges the government 4.75% on the amount of the overdraft. The Commonwealth Secretariat Debt Management Unit, and this has been the case in Trinidad and Tobago for the last 30 years, It is, it's amazing how you get into a sense of complacency in a country. I'm not talking about any government now because I said 30 years. This has been going on for 30 years. So the central bank will fix the repo rate because it is the bank that fixes the repo rate, and then they apply that to the government's overdraft. And it really came into fore in 2012 because for the first time, this country went into permanent overdraft in the year 2012. Prior to that, the country might have gone into overdraft on a very temporary basis, but as revenue came in, the government's account went back into credit. So from 2012, the government went into permanent overdraft under the former administration. And the repo rate is applied to the overdraft. So the Commonwealth consultants made the point that the interest rates on treasury bills, which are short-term debt instruments, are far lower than the rate on the government's overdraft. And in fact, I actually have the rates here before me, Madam Speaker. So the interest rate on a treasury bill, a 6-month treasury bill, because you borrow it and then you pay it back, it's just like an overdraft, is 1.75%. The interest rate on a 1-year treasury bill is 2.72%, and the interest rate on a 2-year treasury bill is 2.94%. So the Commonwealth experts made the point that instead of using the overdraft, where we have to pay 4.75%, we should use treasury bills, revolving treasury bills, where we would pay 1.75% and save ourselves 3% in terms of cash available to the government. And if you think about an overdraft of $8 billion, 3% of that is $240 million that we are now able to save in terms of this measure. So I will be moving an amendment to increase the limit on treasury bills at a later stage. But the purpose will be to give the government the flexibility to either use the overdraft at the central bank or to issue short-term revolving treasury bills. It is part of the fiscal management of this government, trying to exercise prudence and using the best advice available to us, Madam Speaker. Certainly.
If 8 billion is the overdraft, and you pay the interest to the central bank after the 8 billion or for the entire 8 billion during the year?
Finish?
Yeah.
Interest is an annual sum, so that interest is charged on a daily basis. Anybody who will have taken out a loan will know this. I don't know if the member for Caroni doesn't know anything about loan financing. Probably deals everything on a cash basis. So he doesn't understand that interest is calculated by the banks on a daily basis. So I understand. I earn a bag of money. I understand. But anyhow, Madam Speaker, let me just move on. So I've spoken about the private hospitals. In the 5 minutes available to me, let me deal with some particular issues. Madam Speaker, we also adjusting a... Madam Speaker, please, I only have 5 minutes and talk to this.
Please proceed, Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the gains or profits from commercial farms carried out in an approved agricultural holding are exempt from tax for a period of 10 years from the date of approval of the agricultural holding. So all farmers will know this, that if you're making profits from your farming operations, you can apply for and receive tax exemption for a period of 10 years, a 10-year tax holiday. But for some reason, sometime in the past, a government decided that this tax holiday, which is standard in the industry, should not apply to farms in excess of 100 acres. It makes absolutely no sense. Because if there are fiscal incentives available to the agriculture sector, you will want them to be available to the fellow with 2 acres, with 20 acres, with 100 acres, with 200 acres. That's the only way we can stimulate that sector, Madam Speaker, give them fiscal incentives. So we are removing the restriction, the current restriction, which restricts the accessibility of fiscal incentives in agriculture to farms of 100 acres and less. It makes absolutely no sense, but it's one of these archaic things that have been in existence for a long time. So we're taking that out. So whether you have a big farm or a small farm, you can apply for, and if you're eligible, you will receive tax incentives. This is in Clause 6 of the bill and will come into effect on the 1st of January 2018. Madam Speaker, the other clauses, 4, 8, and 10, are designed to clean up some measures that we imposed with the Provisional Collection of Taxes Order. When we imposed the new arrangements for hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles and CNG vehicles, the intention was to encourage the population to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, thereby reducing Trinidad and Tobago's carbon footprint and encouraging people to purchase more fuel-efficient vehicles. The changes we have made this year were addressed in the Provisional Collection of Taxes Order 2017. However, the incentive for hybrid, electric, and CNG-powered vehicles for commercial use were inadvertently omitted, so that the clauses in this bill towards the end are simply designed to incorporate the incentives for hybrid, electric, and CNG-powered vehicles for commercial use. The entire suite of incentives for alternative fuel technology will come into effect on the 1st of January. And now, Madam Speaker, I think I have 1 minute available to me. Madam Speaker, in my winding up, since I cannot do justice to it now, I'm going to give details of two matters which have severely affected the ability of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to meet its cash and financial commitments. I will speak about this in my winding up. One is a put option notice taken out under the Pandey administration in 2000, and the other one is a derivative portfolio taken out under the Bissessa administration in 2013, an interest rate swap and currency swap. Both of these strange instruments, Madam Speaker, have put the government under severe pressure. The put option, for example, we were given 15 days, a couple days ago, to find $660 million immediately to pay off a particular facility taken out by the Pandey administration. But I will deal with that in my winding up. I beg to move, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Variation of Certain Duties and Taxes to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters be now read a second time. Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, was very straightforward in his presentation until the end, when he got worked up a little bit about matters that he will deal with in the winding up of the debate. Generally, that is his style. You know, he will be almost deadpan in his presentation, right? Almost deadpan in his presentation, and at the end of his presentation, in his winding up, he generally is very hot under the collar. I mean, we've come to understand and expect that now. But he outlines the taxes that are going to be imposed, and he rationalizes them. He explains why the taxes are being imposed. And the big rationalization is the sharing of the burden of adjustment. And I am not sure if people feel from the taxes they are already feeling and the ones that are coming on them, whether in fact it is a fair
sharing of the burden of adjustment. And he, in outlining the issues here, he locates the measures that he is putting forward in the context where the government is in a bad situation financially. And therefore, the government must use everything at its disposal to generate revenue and to manage the economy. To some extent, that is true, but it is not the whole story. There are several, I think that there are 8 items, more than that. I think there are 10 items here in the bill, but I just want to deal with 3 of them. I want to focus on 3 aspects. One is the corporation tax. I want to deal a little bit, Madam Speaker, on the value-added tax. And I want to briefly address the issue of the amendment to the Central Bank Act to increase what is essentially an overdraft limit available to government from 15% to 20%. If we can begin with the corporation tax, I think we feel in the economy that the corporation tax and its imposition, although not yet formally felt because it is due on the 1st of January, has already crippled business confidence in the country. It has severely undermined the investment environment, Madam Speaker, and it has revealed this government to be very anti-business. In fact, despite any talk that we might hear to the contrary, the management of the value-added tax has become a kind of fiasco, really. The adjustment made to the tax, which is to tax everything, to reduce VAT to 12.5% with its built-in bias for luxury items, collections not meeting the revenue targets, and an inability to make the VAT system work as it should so that businesses could get their refunds on time. All of these things have put the management of VAT, Madam Speaker, in a very undesirable place. This government has shown, in my estimation, no aptitude for good management, for good governance, or for good government. Clause 2 of the bill will amend the Central Bank Act to increase the amount of advances that the central bank can make to government, which means that the central bank overdraft limit to government will be increased. This raises serious issues, Madam Speaker, about the use of the overdraft facility at the central bank by government, about government's borrowing intentions, and what this will mean for the safety and security of our country in financial and economic terms. And from what the Minister of Finance said in his presentation, I think we can expect that in addition to the other challenges that we might face as a country, we will actually be living on overdraft and living on short-term and longer-term treasury bills over the next few years. Let us take the corporation tax. I've made a few comments on the tax, on the VAT, on the central bank overdraft. Let us take corporation tax, Madam Speaker, to examine what is happening in the business sector and what is happening or will happen to our country because of these additional tax impositions. Corporation tax on profits now goes up 5% to 30%. Corporation tax for banks goes up 10% to 35%. The problem with these impositions is that they are viewed as revenue-generating measures only. That is the real problem with the taxation approach, policy, if you want to call it that, of the government. That they see taxation as a revenue-generating measure only. And you can see that in the way the minister talked about the banks. They are making super profits, he said, and as a result, they are entitled to pay higher taxes. Now, but taxation requires a fuller appreciation of what is likely to be the impact on business behavior and consequently on the national economy. Taxes and the way you impose taxes and the way people respond to taxes determine how they behave, and how they behave affects an economy. This 35 and 30% tax have to be added to a 1% tax on $1 million profit imposed in 2017. It has to be added to increased contributions to the Green Fund and to the unemployment levy imposed in the 2016 budget. Business in Trinidad and Tobago has been hit by all of these in the last 2 years, Madam Speaker. In addition, there are the delays in VAT refunds, which impacts directly on cash flow of any business affected. And then there's the foreign exchange crunch, which continues unabated, unrelieved, without policy coherent decisions by this government. And then there is the increased cost of security that you have to add to any business. When you add the various taxes, the effect of these cumulative increases, the cash flow impact of late VAT refunds, the pressure for foreign exchange, and the increased security costs, we have to readily admit that businesses in Trinidad and Tobago are in some trouble. Let's take investment. To diversify, we need investments outside of oil and gas. The financial sector has been identified for investment, growth, and expansion. And the financial sector is the only sector, Madam Speaker, that is not in decline at this time, according to the review of the economy. But why would anyone invest in the financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago, of all places, with a tax rate which in real terms turns out to be cumulatively about 37%? So there is no rational link between taxation policy and the International Financial Center, which is an institution that has been designed to promote financial investment. And there is no link either to finance as a driver of diversification in the economy. So the taxation measures undermine your diversification strategy, and they undermine your emphasis on finance as one of those sectors that must drive diversification. You may say that the banks make a good profit, and you did say so, Minister, and I agree, and that the financial sector businesses are doing well, and that is true in relative terms. But who pays ultimately for increased taxes? And who pays for reduced profit margins by the banks or any other businesses? If not the consumer, the ordinary citizen, who must deal with a bank or financial institution to function in the society. Whatever taxes you impose, whatever cost you impose on the business sector, on the corporate sector, on the banking sector, ultimately, the person that is hit is the consumer in the marketplace. And therefore, when you're doing taxation, you have to think not just of your diversification strategy in the case of finance, or of the role of finance in that diversification strategy. You also have to think ultimately, how is that going to hit the ordinary consumer in the system? What about the business sector outside of finance, Madam Speaker? We have conglomerates. What are they doing in this climate of no confidence, economic decline and recession, and scarce foreign exchange? Well, they are investing elsewhere, where taxes are more favorable, where foreign exchange is readily available, or at least more readily available, and where business confidence and consumer confidence are better. It is quite possible over time that the headquarters of such companies may come to be located elsewhere than Trinidad and Tobago, where it makes for them more financial, more economic, and more taxation sense for the companies involved. What about small and medium enterprises in this country? This is the largest group of functioning businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. They are in manufacturing, they are in services, they are in retail, and their export capability is limited. How is the Exim Bank facility doing with the manufacturing sector, Mr. Minister? Tell us something about that. Perhaps it's going well, and I certainly hope so. Has it been capitalized? The manufacturing sector is partially dependent to varying degrees on imported inputs for their production, and therefore they are foreign exchange dependent. This facility was supposed to kick in to create a different stream than the normal banking stream for this particular sector. Is this facility by the Exim Bank in use? And manufacturers drawing on the facility, are they exporting more? Are they producing more? Are they winning more foreign exchange to repay the Exim Bank so that it does not have to be constantly recapitalized? And are they making more profits and growing? What about the services sector? Are we expanding exports in this sector? When I was Minister of Planning, I left in place an IDB-funded facility to stimulate services investment at home that are export-oriented and to support ICT services businesses to export more. I know the Minister of Planning is supportive of this project, and I just want to ask, are we making any headway in making foreign exchange earnings possible in this services sector, and what is happening with exports generally? I saw the Minister of Trade recently renaming Export TT as Export House now. What difference will that make if you change the name and all else remains the same? Export TT spokespersons say they will double exports by 2020. How? What are the products? What are the markets? What companies? Talk is always cheap, and because of that, it is plentiful, but actually getting things done requires planned execution. And execution is the missing ingredient with this government. Hence, the result, which is dismal performance. What about the retail sector? Entirely dependent on foreign exchange, Madam Speaker. I heard the president of the Shagwanas Chamber, Mr. Vishnu Charan, recently speaking about agro-based manufacturing for export and calling on retailers to get involved in such businesses. That would be a good thing if they were able to finesse it, if they were able to manage it. But as everything else, it takes time from conception to execution, and ultimately, of course, to what really matters, which is results. What is going to happen to the retailers in the meantime? All of this is directly related to taxes. If the economy is shrinking, and this is the point I am making, Madam Speaker, if the economy is shrinking, if confidence is low, if businesses are doing badly and are not profitable, if exports are not growing, if foreign exchange demand cannot be met and does not discriminate between import and export activity, some businesses will collapse. Banks will foreclose, as they are doing already. People will shut their businesses down, as some are doing. And who then, Madam Speaker, will the Minister of Finance collect taxes from? Isn't it better to have lower taxes, a buoyant economy, stimulated exports, more foreign exchange earnings, more business and consumer confidence, and more businesses paying taxes and more consumers paying VAT? Because I want to say that this VAT-related matter, in this particular instance, it is about, and I will talk about the policy contradiction. In this particular instance, it is removing the concession to people who are importing high-end cars that do not add pollution to the system, electric, CNG, etc. But this whole business of VAT, the concept of VAT in taxation is based on an economy that is vibrant. It is based on the notion that consumers will purchase. And what will happen is that the repeat of VAT on purchase after purchase will generate revenue for the state or for the tax person, for the tax institution. If you have a weak economy, if you have declining sectors, if you have a situation in which in Trinidad and Tobago, businesses are not buoyant, they are looking for greener pastures outside simply to manage their businesses at home because they cannot generate the foreign exchange from here. What is going to happen, Madam Speaker, is that even the VAT domain, which requires consumer confidence and consumer participation in the economy, is going to be affected negatively. The flaw in the taxation strategy, Madam Speaker, therefore, is that you will get less by taxing more. And I want to say that to the Minister. I do not mean that in any way to be overly critical, but you can tax more and get less, which is what we have been seeing. The evidence is there. And you can get more by taxing less if you build business confidence, if you attract investment, if you grow businesses, if you focus government expenditure on productive endeavor to stimulate the economy further, and which would also draw in the private sector and action by the private sector. You can do it by growing and expanding exports, by diversifying the sources of production and the sources of foreign exchange. I think, Minister, by going for high taxes and hoping that you will get high revenue, I think that you are on the wrong track. You are creating a problem, a further problem, rather than providing a solution to a buoyant economy, a growth economy, a diversifying economy, an investment-oriented economy. So, value-added tax. This is another messed up situation, you might say, Madam Speaker. You want to have, the government wants to have a policy on low carbon emission, but they don't want people to take advantage of the tax concession by buying big cars. So here you have a contradiction in policy. I understand why he would do it, but again, from a policy point of view, there is a contradiction. So a tax VAT is now imposed on hybrid CNG and electric cars. I won't quarrel with that. But I'm talking about contradictory signals given by the government about policy. In this particular issue of taxation on high-end cars, which is an imposition of a 12.5% VAT cost on the car. VAT raises other issues concerning VAT when you mention the issue of VAT. The $5.5 billion owed to the private sector businesses, for instance, which was mentioned recently. The $5.5 billion owed to the private sector raised issues about it some time ago, about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. The Minister of Finance responded in I would say, a kind of hostile way to the businesses. And basically, every time they respond to the private sector, they take the view that the private sector is the problem, not government. You know what, Madam Speaker, the release of $5.5 billion can do for businesses, and it is their money for refund. You know what that can do if it goes into the business community, legitimately due to them? Do you know the positive impact that so much money can have on cash flow in individual businesses and in businesses as a whole? The impact it can have on operations management, the management of operations. Madam Speaker, I didn't say anything, but I mean, they are talking a lot and disturbing me.
Members, can I remind you all of Standing Order 53? Again, I point to the fact that you all know the limitations of the chamber. And therefore, if there's going to be talking, please let it be in hushed tones and not sustained. Continue, Member for Carrying.
Thank
Central.
you. Do you know, thank you, Madam Speaker, I appreciate it. Do you know the impact it can have on the management of operations? The impact it can have on receivables? The impact on the circulation of money in the economy? And the sustainability of business clusters. You see, because that's how businesses work. When you tax a business and the confidence is lost and you have a problem and they are not doing well, you have about 20 or 30 other businesses that are suppliers or receivers of one form or another that are affected by the process. And that is what basically stymies, ultimately, the cluster and creates the conditions in which you really have a kind of shutdown, a slowdown, you really have a contracting of the economy. Now, I noticed that in the IMF report, which I have here, Madam Speaker, they do speak in that report of the need for a tax policy unit. So I don't think it is just me saying that we have a problem of contradiction of policy and you have a problem of how you apply the policy. I think the IMF is saying, and you know, they tend to be more subtle than harsh in their pronouncement. When they say that you need a policy unit, it means that policy on taxation is not really coordinated, that something is missing and it needs to have more coherence. They talk about more comprehensive collections. So I am not being unreasonable when I say that, look, if you had less taxes and you had more comprehensive collections, if you actually got better compliance. And this is another issue. If you have high taxes, people will find means of evasion. If you have reasonable taxes, people are more likely to comply. And higher compliance will lead to higher revenue. And the third thing is that the IMF is also very, very sanguine about the fact that you cannot have policies that are fiscally oriented or that are taxation oriented or that have to do with the management of foreign exchange without a very, very comprehensive framework of policy in which these things fit. You see, and this is very important, and I think that is the missing ingredient in all of these budgets. Remember, we've had 3 budgets and 2 mid-year reviews now. We had the 2016 budget, which was restoring confidence and building trust. Let's do this together. I don't think we can say that that budget restored confidence and built trust. I think the second budget, the 2017 budget, was shaping a brighter future, a blueprint for transformation and growth. I don't think we saw any of the structural changes to the economy that would lead to transformation and growth. And in all of these documents, in the 2017 budget, for instance, we see on page 13 here, Madam Speaker, the revised revenue for 2016 is $15 billion lower than originally estimated. So they made an estimation. We told them here during that particular budget debate it would never be realized. And it turned out that the budget was short. In the 2018 budget, which I have here, which is changing the paradigm, putting the economy on a sustainable path, which I don't think will happen. I don't think the paradigm is shifted. I don't think this budget will put us on a sustainable path. It says here, again on page 7, total revenue in 2017 was thus roughly $10 billion lower than envisaged, largely because of the shortfall in the above-mentioned areas. So the taxation policy, the revenue-generating policy, Madam Speaker, is not working. We are not getting the money from the taxes. We are not raising the money from the VAT. We are not coherent enough in the policy to make things happen in a significant way. And therefore, we have no choice, and that is where we're going. We have no choice but go into borrowing. And that is the significance of the amendment that the minister wants on treasury bills, and that is the significance of his amendment to Clause 46(2) of the Central Bank Act, in which he amends 15 to 20, and that entire clause reads, the total amount of outstanding advances made under this section shall not at any time exceed 15% of that portion of the estimates of annual revenue of the government, which comprises the sum of total recurrent revenues and capital receipts exclusive of local external loans for the financial year in which the advances were initially made. So he's taking that up, Madam Speaker, to 20%. Now, the minister said that, you know, we put yeah.
Time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to.
Thank you very much, Madam.
Please proceed.
The minister member for Diego Martin Northeast said that we put the overdraft in permanent overdraft condition in 2012. That is not true, and the evidence will show that. The evidence will show that from 2005, because we went through this in the Public Accounts Committee, we went through this with the Auditor General's report. I wrote to the governor of the central bank asking him to clarify certain things to the secretary of the committee, and he wrote back clarifying it. And he made it very clear that the overdraft in the central bank was used from about 2005, and that it would fluctuate from time to time. And this was whether a government had a lot of revenue or they did not have a revenue. Because the reason they would use it is because you could get short-term cash, which had to be replaced. And that is why governments use it. It is, I think, in this particular instance that we are seeing that the overdraft is going to become a permanent condition for Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to warn against it. We are now about 63% debt to GDP ratio in this country. And one of the things that the IMF report talks about in here and the things that they are most frightened about, Madam Speaker, is the debt, the growing debt to GDP ratio, the decline in GDP, and the inability of the country under any circumstances to be able to repay that debt. This is a serious, very, very serious matter. And I want to, I'm looking for a document here which I prepared. I'm not finding it. But the IMF is, I think, more than anything else, it is concerned about that. It is concerned about the fact that we are not achieving our revenue targets and that the policies are not working. It is concerned about the fact that the expenditure is not going down. As a matter of fact, they say at one point that we need a continuous, a targeted 6.5% cut. But I think the more important issue that they raise is the issue of the pattern of expenditure. You know, what is it you spend your money on? What are your priorities? Now, the last time I spoke about the IMF, the member for St. Joseph got up and said, since when I am such a fan or for, the, who? You stood up right there and said that. No, I said the last time I spoke in this house here, Madam Speaker, I mentioned the IMF. And he said he doesn't understand why I become such an endorser of IMF policies. And so I am not endorsing IMF policies. The IMF, the next assessment of Trinidad and Tobago is going to be in 12 months. And what they have given here is a trajectory of where we are at the present time and what is likely to happen over the year, and they take into account what government has said. And they have put forward certain positions. I'm not saying the IMF report is not to be taken and swallowed and everything, you do everything that they say, but I think anybody would be foolish and certainly not on this right side of caution if they did not look at the IMF report and see what they are saying and thinking before embarking on policy action and policy initiatives. You must do that. You have to take it into account. And the thing that they are most concerned about is the issue of debt. They are worried that we are going to get ourselves in a situation where we cannot pay. And at that time, what we will have to worry about is not so much the IMF coming to take us over here. What we'll have to be worried about more than that, we will have to worry about things like civil unrest. We will have to worry about the deteriorating state of the economy and what it will do to our intellectual capital. We already have a capital flight issue in this country with the foreign exchange. We are already beginning to have an intellectual capital flight issue because of the conditions in which people are operating. Anybody who deals with the business community will tell you that people are very concerned about what is happening to their children, whether they should tell them to come back and so on. And you're talking about different ranges of business here. You're talking, when you talk to people who are abroad and studying, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago in their 20s and their 30s, they're very worried. So what is required of the government is to give the country a sense of confidence, a sense of security about what our situation here is and what it's going to be. And one of the big problems with these budgets, 3 of them now, is that at the end of the budgets and at the adoption of the measures, as we are doing here today, you don't know what direction the country is headed. You cannot tell what new stage we are going to arrive at 12 months from now and what that platform will be to allow you maybe to go on for another 12 months and to build on it. And this is where listening to what the IMF says is important. It seems from their report that the IMF does view the continuing economic decline and persistence of the recession in Trinidad and Tobago as troubling. Indeed, there are certain things that have alarmed them. The large terms of trade shock, okay, which is now that we don't have the energy exports, we are not getting the revenue from exports in other areas to substantiate it, to replace it. The level of fiscal debt, which they anticipate will reach 13% of GDP. The foreign exchange shortage, which they talk about. And I must say, in reading the IMF report, I was quite surprised because the IMF did not make any recommendation for a dramatic movement of the foreign exchange. They said that that was necessary, but they recommended a band, Madam Speaker, within which one might manage the foreign exchange in order to create the conditions where things are better. They are worried about other things too, which they call, for instance, what they call the minimal yields of revenue measures, that is to say revenue shortfalls.
I just want to remind you, this is not a general budget debate.
Yes.
Or general debate about the state of the economy. I understood some of what you ventured into to tie into the particular measures, but my view is that you're now going outside of that, and I would like you to quickly connect what you're doing to the measures that we're considering.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The point I'm making, Madam Speaker, is that this is our third budget, and we are no closer in terms of the direction of the economy. This is our third budget, and we are no better off in terms of knowing where we are headed. This is our third budget, and we are now imposing the measures, the taxation measures, and the confidence in the economy is worse than it has ever been before. And what I am saying, Madam Speaker, is that the government needs to take into account that nothing will happen in this country without confidence, without investment, without growth. If these things are not seen as the things of paramount concern, the issues that we are dealing with here in this particular bill, the finance bill, will really make no impact on the economy. And at the end of the day, what you want are people working, people earning, and an economy in which consumers are consuming, an economy in which business is growing internally, that's to say inside the country, but also growing outside the country, that's to say through exports and so on. And in that particular situation, Madam Speaker, I think that there are more significant things that need to be done than what the government is doing now. Thank you.
Member for Aruka Maloney.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have listened in amazement to the member for Caroni Central, who consistently portrays himself as an economist, someone who is versed in business development, someone who is the purveyor of all knowledge on the economy. And Madam Speaker, I just want to remind this House and the national community that the member for Caroni Central has a degree in English. The member for Caroni Central has never run a business. The member for Caroni Central has never run even a parlor. I don't portray myself to be a business person. I'm an attorney at law. And at this point, I am a member of parliament and a representative of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, consistently on each occasion that the member for Caroni Central stands in this House, he tries to advocate to the people of Trinidad and Tobago that they must have a certain level of lack of confidence in the economy and lack of confidence in what this government is doing for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and for the country that is Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, when we on this side stand and say that they on the other side are unpatriotic, we will say it consistently, because on every single occasion that they stand in this parliament, they display a lack of patriotism. And Madam Speaker, let me remind the national community that several decades ago, with the People's National Movement in government, it was those on the other side who consistently told people that they should be fearful, that they should be fearful of the government that was in power. And as a result of that, several persons left this country seeking refugee status in Canada. Madam Speaker, I'm sure you could remember that. They sought refugee status in Canada. They told the Canadian authorities a series of untruths, including that the police would not listen to them, including that they were being raped, including several totally untrue statements that resulted eventually in the Canadian authorities saying that Trinidad and Tobago had to be a country that had to have a visa to go to Canada. That's right. And that was because of the narrative that was put across by those on the other side, yes. Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, today we are facing a similar situation with the level of fake news that has been taking place and perpetrated by supporters of those on the other side. And also, just today, the member for Caroni Central is talking about capital flight. Madam Speaker, we have no evidence of capital flight taking place in this country. Madam Speaker, we have no evidence of businesses saying
that the government start the business.
Any member who intends to join the debate will be given an opportunity to join the debate when the time comes, once I catch their eyes. I'm not going to tolerate all of the crosstalk and the interjections, the improper interjections. Please continue, Member for Brookham.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have absolutely no evidence of any capital flight taking place. Madam Speaker, what are the facts? The facts are that at this time, business is being asked to share in the burden as everybody else in this country. Madam Speaker, what are the facts? It is a PNM government, Madam Speaker, that moved the tax rate from 75%, Madam Speaker, to 25% over a period of time. 75% was once the tax rate in this country, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, what are the facts today? The member for Caroni Central talked about the VAT, that the non-repayment of VAT. But Madam Speaker, during their tenure, the VAT non-repayment level was at the level of $6 billion. Wow. And Madam Speaker, let me remind you that when that happens, what is really happening is that the government is taking a loan of the VAT funds. That $6 billion was another of their loans that they took from the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, we have brought it down at this time to just over $4 billion, Madam Speaker, in the 2-year period that we have been in government. Madam Speaker, In addition to that, inflation is down at one of the lowest levels that it has been for the past 7 years, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what is the truth? Madam Speaker, unemployment levels are also down, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have not seen any major layoffs in this country. We have heard them saying that 25,000 people are on the breadline. Madam Speaker, totally inaccurate. Totally inaccurate. The official figures show that the number is in the region of just over 2,000 persons, Madam Speaker. Yes, the official figures show that. And Madam Speaker, when we ask business people who are experiencing, as my colleague said, super profits to pay a little more, what is wrong with that, Madam Speaker? What is wrong with that? Especially at a time when our country is going through a challenging period. And Madam Speaker, despite the fact that this is a challenging period for Trinidad and Tobago, we as a government have been able to keep this economy stable, and it is expected to experience a slight growth in this fiscal year, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, the question that we on this side would like to ask is, why is it so consistent that those on the other side consistently tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago to have no confidence in the economy, to feel that they must not pay their taxes, Madam Speaker?
That is property tax.
They don't want to pay property tax. They don't want the people to pay property tax. We have imposed an increase in taxation on the businesses that are doing well. They don't want the business people to pay that tax, Madam Speaker. What is their agenda, Madam Speaker? What is their agenda? And Madam Speaker, whilst they say don't pay taxes, they wouldn't bring back any of the money that they have taken from the Treasury. Not 1 cent.
48.6. 48.6.
Please continue, Member Farooq.
Madam Speaker, the question we have to ask on this side, do you want persons who are not making profits to pay the extra tax? Madam Speaker, it's the persons who are making profits who we are asking to pay the tax. And Madam Speaker, despite the fact that they are not voluntarily bringing back the money, it will be brought back because we will go and get it. And Madam Speaker, we have heard the Attorney General talk about the follow the money and all the different pieces of legislation that are being brought. Every one of them on that side, whatever they took, will be returned to the Treasury.
48.4. I didn't take any money out of the country. Nobody understands.
He was receiving a bill. He was eating food in Marie Le Pen. Sell it.
Member for Naparima, is there a point of order?
I did say standing order 48.4. Insulting language. And implied.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I hope Naparima's conscience isn't beating him.
Don't eat that.
But Madam Speaker, I want to remind our colleagues on the other side that the foreign exchange that has been injected into this economy between 2015 and to date is as follows. In 2015, the central bank injected into the commercial banking sector, United States dollars $2.64 billion, Madam Speaker. In 2016, the injection was $1.81 billion, Madam Speaker. 2017 to date, it's US $1.71 billion, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, when those on the other side talk about lack of confidence, that those who are making profits shouldn't pay an additional tax, and in fact, that additional tax, in reality, the effective tax rate is only in the order of 18%, Madam Speaker. So whereas we have said it will increase by 5%, the effective tax rate is only 18%, not 35%. The effective tax rate is 18%. And Madam Speaker, I see Caroni Central leaving. But Madam Speaker, let me say that it is not the Minister of Finance saying that, it is not the Minister of Planning and Development saying that. It is trained economists telling us that the effective tax rate is 18%. And Madam Speaker, whereas the member for Caroni Central has said, again fake news, that the PNM don't like business and the PNM against business. Madam Speaker, it is the PNM that has built business in this country because of the number of incentives, hundreds of incentives, Madam Speaker, that under PNM administrations have been put in place. Madam Speaker, incentives like the import substitution, there are tourism incentives, there are hotel incentives. Madam Speaker, in every sphere of business endeavor, the People's National Movement over the years in government have put incentives to encourage business in this country. Manufacturers have incentives. Agricultural production has incentives. Tourism has incentives. Education has incentives. Madam Speaker, it is in every sphere of endeavor. Senior citizens' homes have incentives. It is in every, Naparima, I know you'll be happy to hear that. It is in every sphere of endeavor, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I want to remind those who are opposite us that it is clear that they feel that business people should not operate in a way that redounds to the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why, under the tenure of Caroni Central, there was an attempt to give away Invaders Bay without using the proper procedure. Madam Speaker, that is a situation that we are still dealing with in the courts of Trinidad and Tobago. We are before the Privy Council in that matter. Madam Speaker, in the same way, the Eddie Hart ground being used without let or hindrance previously, but under Caroni Central, there was an attempt to stymie the use of the Eddie Hart ground so that the residents of the area could not use the area, the ground. Madam Speaker, it is the same attitude that led them to use the land at Chagaramas in a way that we are still attempting to unravel, because they are of the clear view that businesses should not operate in a way that redounds to the benefit of all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why we have put, at this time, where the Minister of Finance has said he is shifting the paradigm, all of us must bear the burden of adjustment. Business people are being asked to pay more. Madam Speaker, it was the First Citizens Bank after the 2017-2018 budget was presented, said, overall, the 2017-2018 budget unveils a commitment by the present administration to fiscal prudence and continued focus on more sustainable levels of spending. Additionally, Madam Speaker, Ernst & Young said, the Honourable Minister of Finance has attempted to prepare a budget that seeks to provide fiscal incentives such as promoting housing development and farming. He has also sought to implement revenue-generating measures such as increasing the burden of taxes on standard-rated corporations, commercial banks, and energy companies. Madam Speaker, well-accepted practice. Well-accepted practice. Fair to corporations alike across the board, Madam Speaker. And today, as we come with the Finance Act to implement, to legalize those taxes, Madam Speaker, those on the other side are of the view that that should not take place. But Madam Speaker, it is in the same breath as what they did with regard to the anti-gang legislation, trying and making every attempt to stymie what is good for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, trying with every breath to make sure that what is good for all the people must not be put in place by this government. But Madam Speaker, in the same way that they have not decided to appoint their members to the Vision 2030 Joint Select Committee, that is not going to stop us. We are going to fight crime from the north, the south, the east, the west, Madam Speaker. And we will also fight crime in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago if it rears its head. And Madam Speaker, in that same way, we will ensure that this economy, under very challenging circumstances, does not collapse, which is what they would like to see happen. Yes, Naparima, we know that is what you all want, but that is not going to happen under the leadership of the Member of Parliament for Diego Martin West. And Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, we have said consistently that all must share in the burden of adjustment. We have said consistently that all who owe taxes must pay taxes. And Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to support the Minister of Finance in this act to provide for the variation of certain duties and taxes and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters. And Madam Speaker, all of us on this side will work consistently to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago continues to strive and thrive even during these difficult times, even during these challenging times. And Madam Speaker, I want to pay particular attention to the environmental tire tax, as it's called. Madam Speaker, one of the major pillars of the Vision 2030 is to deal with environmental issues in Trinidad and Tobago. We have seen a situation developing where persons have brought in tires that they claim to be used that are not used tires, or that they claim to be new that are not new tires. And this environmental tax is to deal with that issue and also the issue of ensuring the proper disposal of tires, and that's an important aspect of the environmental issue of recycling. And Madam Speaker, this is particularly heartwarming to us in the Ministry of Planning and Development. Madam Speaker, ours is a mission to ensure that this economy, which was damaged over the period 2010 to 2015, Madam Speaker, ours is a mission to ensure that this economy, which was damaged during the period 2010 to 2015 by corruption, by mismanagement, by waste, that this economy is returned to an even keel, is returned to a level of sanity, that productivity and a true work ethic is returned to this country, Madam Speaker. And by every opportunity that those of us get to do that, we will do that in the interest of the people, all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Shagona cease.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for recognizing me and allowing me to make my contribution on this bill, an act to provide for the variation of certain duties and taxes, and to introduce provisions of a fiscal nature and for related matters. Madam Speaker, before I get into the substance of my presentation, permit me to just make a few rebuttals, in a sense, or responses to my colleague, the member for Aruka Maloney. The member for Aruka Maloney was indicating in her presentation that we, in a sense, if I may paraphrase, find glee and happiness when the economy is not performing well. That's true. And it is predicated on the fact that we are unpatriotic. Madam Speaker, I want to tell you, Madam Speaker, to those who listen attentively will learn most. I want to give the unconditional assurance that every one of us on this side, as citizens of this beloved Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, we were born here, we continue to live here, and we may die here. We are patriots like anybody else on the other side. I will not respond to some of my very good friends on the other side. I will leave that to pass. But I want to just say that the aspect of loss of confidence in the economy abounds across everywhere. Madam Speaker, it is evident that people are not putting their money, they're not investing significantly. And there's a private motion which I have filed in my name, where we're going to debate this extensively. The evidence is there. People are scared, they are uncertain. I can tell you, for example, from first-hand information of people who I have spoken to, that even persons who are in the school feeding program, while they may have been paid some money, they're still owed substantial amount of monies. They have been paid about 10 or 20% up to the month of May. And many of them, I find it very difficult to understand how will they be able to make ends meet when the new school term starts. I'm saying that in the context of this loss of confidence. Madam Speaker, who it doesn't happen to will not realize and understand the context. People are dipping into their savings in this country to make ends meet. And then we are also saying that there are several decades ago of this kind of feeling. We are saying as well that people should not be fearful. But we know that people are fearful. They're afraid of losing their jobs. Madam Speaker, they're afraid of so many things in this country. You look at what is happening at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. My colleague, the member for Arima, is asking the union to give him proposals as to how we'll continue to survive as a university. So fear abounds everywhere. And I don't take any happiness or any glee in that. In fact, it bothers me, it concerns me, and it worries me when we see this happening. Because never have we seen our country, our nation, plunge into this level of depression and hopelessness. Madam Speaker, if you wanted to know whether there's still capital flight or whether there's still human flight, I can give you 2 examples. You pass any day or every day by particularly one embassy in Queen's Park West, and you'll see people continue to line up. And when you ask the question, what are you lining up for? Is it a visitor's visa? Many people want to migrate. And that's the truth. And why are they doing that? People, again, as well, in terms of, you want to go to get an example of human flight, locally right here, in terms of internal occupational migration. I'll give you an example, and I'm sure my friend, the Minister of Education, will understand this firsthand. People are leaving the University of Trinidad and Tobago out of fear that they may lose their jobs, and they're looking elsewhere, and there's a hemorrhage almost. But I want to get into the substantive part of my presentation, Madam Speaker. But let me just respond with one more item. That aspect of inflation. Remember, Farouka Maloney indicated that inflation is down. Madam Speaker, anybody who did Economics 101, anybody who would have read a textbook of economics by J.L. Hansen in room 107 will know that if demand falls, if you don't have disposable income, what you think will happen to the goods and services on your hand? You can't sell it unless the price goes down. So people don't have disposable income, and therefore inflation, you don't have inflation. What you have is falling prices. So how come inflation, you're going to boast that inflation is down? Inflation must be down because you don't have money to buy goods and services. Madam Speaker, unemployment as well, we are being told, is down. Unemployment is down. But you know what we are being told? Why doesn't the government tell us how many jobs you have created in 2 years in your term of office? But you know where the jobs are? 35,000 jobs are available where? To go and drive truck in Canada. Is that what we're telling our people? And I just want to indicate that for us, when we look at the SME sector in Trinidad and Tobago, you will see that that is a significant part of our economy. In the United States, it forms 99.7%. But what we have experienced in Trinidad and Tobago in the post-1970 period, which is so eloquently placed by Professor Selwyn Ryan when he talks about the reconstruction of our society, is that we have seen the burgeoning of the largest state enterprise sector in the entire Caribbean. Madam Speaker, I want to get now into the substantive part of the motion, into the bill, sorry. And I want to deal, first of all, with this aspect of the environmental tire tax. And what we are being told is that this tax of $20, and I refer this section, part 3A of the bill, of the finance bill, and the Honourable Minister of Finance did make that connection to the budget speech, and particularly with respect to pages 101 and 102. And what he was saying there, and what he said this evening as well, is that, number one, there were irregularities which were noticed between duties charged on importation of new tires and foreign used tires. And my information and investigation reveals that there is some truth to that there are some persons, and what I'm also told, is that within the same container you may have used tires intermingled with new tires. So it becomes very cumbersome. And what Minister of Finance is saying to us is that he's now going to equalize the custom duties in terms of foreign used tires and new tires, both of which will fetch a custom duty of 30%. Madam Speaker, I find that a bit strenuous, especially when there are persons who could afford to buy these new tires at the 30%, but there are persons at the lower end of the income ladder in Trinidad and Tobago who will find as a precipitous increase from 5% duty. You are now increasing that to 25%, more to 30% for foreign used tires. Madam Speaker, for us, some of us who might be able to make those purchases, that will be all well and good. But what about the average person, the person who in fact has lost their job, trying to sell something to eke out a living? Persons in the lower level of the income in our society. Madam Speaker, This is not the ability to continue to buy Roadstone or Firestone tires. They might have to buy Flintstone tires because we're going back rather than moving forward. I can give you evidence here in terms of the cost of these tires, and we are being told, Madam Speaker, that in some cases there are 500,000 tires that are changed annually. In some cases, we have information that there's 1.5 million every year that are being, people are changing. You have these used tires. And therefore, we find it very difficult and very harsh if you increase at the lower level a 25% increase on used tires. Many years ago, what used to happen is that you would have a tire recapping or retreading industry in this country. And people used to buy recap tires. I remember our home, we used to buy recap tires. And the reason why you buy recap tires is because you couldn't afford to buy the brand new tires. They were exorbitant in price compared to what you were working for. And if you didn't have a job, well, it was even worse. And therefore, I find that this aspect of it, if at all, it could be reconsidered, but I know it is going to put an additional burden. When you increase for the poor man in this society, that cost of these tires, and particularly in terms of the foreign use tires, and he's telling you, this income earner, this vehicle owner, this driver is telling you, that I could only afford to buy these tires at about $125 a one, as opposed to the exorbitant price of the new tires. When this custom duty is added, and it is being said the reason for it is because of tax evasion and also mislabeling. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, I think it's also important for us, and I think the Minister of Finance, and he maintained the import duty on buses and lorries at 15%. But when these tires go up, the foreign use tires, and particularly where people might have to use their vehicles, sometimes supply the PH trade, what's going to happen to the cost of transportation? It's going to have an impact. And therefore, I think it's very important for us to consider the consequences of this sharp increase. Well, Madam Speaker, I want to come to the aspect now of this $20 environmental tax per tire. Madam Speaker, recently I had the opportunity to change tires on my vehicle. And I was told at that tire shop that you can leave the tires that you are changing for us to dispose of it, and you pay $5 per tire. Or you can take that tire with you, and you can dispose of it. Madam Speaker, I don't think that's going to solve anything significantly. Because if you allow me to take the tire, I may continue, or people who as such may continue to do what they want to do in the way in which they normally will dispose of these tires. These tires are significant health risk in terms of catchment for water and so on, and mosquitoes and all the other things that are dangerous to us as human beings. But I want to say as well, when you look at that whole concept of the disposal of the tires, we had seen recently where 2 mobile tire shredders are now in place via SWIMCAL. And I had the opportunity, and I deliberately passed today at the SWIMCAL facility to see what was happening there. The shredders. And the 2 shredders are there. But you know, there are some questions that we like to ask about these shredders. Madam Speaker, first of all, I think it's important for us to understand that when we look at where these tires, you have thousands of tires that are heaped up right at C-Lot, opposite the Central Market. And you have 2 shredders. And when I visited this morning, none of the shredders were working. None of the shredders were working. As a matter of fact, my information is, when the shredders were brought here in 2014, that they were brought and they were operative. But when the governments changed, these shredders ceased to work, except more recently, when we saw the evidence of one being used at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation. The point I'm making to you, Madam Speaker, is why is it, if we want to have an effective tire disposal facility or facilities, why is it that we are heaping up all these tires at the entrance to our city? And again, I think there are some important questions that one will want to raise in terms of these. This $20 that is going to be taxed, is it that, and we are told in the information in the bill that the collection agency is going to be the Customs and Excise Department. I want to say truthfully, I have spoken to a lot of people, and even I don't fully understand how this money is going to be disbursed. Madam Speaker, it is very clear that there is no effective plan to handle the disposal of these tires with this cost. And therefore, I think it is important for us to understand the whole concept as to how we're going to be disposing these tires, these hundreds of thousands or millions of tires, which will present a safety hazard. And therefore, I think it is important, again, for us to understand the context in which we'll be operating in terms of the tire disposal. Madam Speaker, the cost that one will pay on the average at a tire shop is like $3 or $5. And when I ask these tire dealers, what happens to these tires when you sell them to these people who collect these tires, they don't have an idea. They don't know what is going to happen. Although we are sometimes told, if we find out, that these people who collect these tires will take them to the tire shredders at Silot under the jurisdiction of the responsibility of Swimcol. Madam Speaker, when we look at how this thing is going to be implemented, the question you want to ask as well is, when the Customs and Excise collect these funds as the tax authority, where will these funds go to? Is it that it's going to go into the consolidated fund? What is the process by which people are going to be apportioned payments for the collection of these tires, for the transportation of these tires to the shredders, and also to the disposal of these tires? I think it is important for us to, again, make a strong recommendation for some of these things to be legislated. In fact, I think there should be a system of fines and penalties as opposed to simply a fee to dispose of these tires. And the reason is simple. I don't think that people are going to adhere strictly to the disposal of these tires for $20 per tire. Imagine now that you have increased the price of foreign use tires for a motorcar owner, and he's changing 4 tires. That's an additional $80, and one does not know how it is going to be disposed of. So I think there are some things that we need to clarify that we have not clarified as yet. I think it's important for the Honorable Minister of Finance to give some very strong and very clear guidelines as to the disposal of these tires. Madam Speaker, I think as well it is important for us to look at alternative ways in which these tires could be disposed of. One of the things that I'm looking at, and I think that it may be on the drawing board as well, is that you have 2 shredders that we know of in Trinidad, I don't know of any in Tobago, that will be responsible for shredding these hundreds of thousands of tires. I saw in one of the official documents, the budget documents, that the Metal Industries Company, Institute of Technology, the MIC Institute of Technology, is now in the process of using their technicians and their engineers to design a prototype shredder. And that is commendable. But I think it is not sufficient. It might be better if we were to handle the disposal of these tires on a regional cooperation basis. Which means you're going to make it easily accessible. If people want to dispose of the tires, if they didn't want to leave it at the tire shop, if they didn't want to pay that additional fee, to take it to these collection points under the jurisdiction of the regional corporations at a particularly designated area. I think what is also going to happen is that in these regional corporations, we have these health and safety officers who normally walk around and we look at where vehicles are parked obstructing the roadway. We see that regularly, where debris is on the roadway, people mix all kind of concrete on the road itself, and lots are not being cleared. So all of these are important. While it's an environmental tax, they are environmental hazards. And therefore, it is my strong recommendation that to decentralize, to ensure that there's the effective coordination and there's a willingness of people to properly dispose of these tires, it might be best under the jurisdiction of the regional corporations, each of whom, all 14, can have their individual tire shredders in addition to the THA in Tobago. I think that is going to make it very organized and very systematic. Madam Speaker, I think as well what is important is the whole aspect of the record keeping of these tire shops. It might be cumbersome, it might be an administrative burden, but if we cannot track where these tires are going, one doesn't know what is going to happen to them. As a matter of fact as well, I saw recently where the Honorable Prime Minister, member for Diego Martin West, visited the Carib Glass Works, and he was talking about the fact that recycling was going to be on the front burner. But while we are having this tax being implemented, we're not hearing very much about the plans for recycling. In the Canadian system, Madam Speaker, if you wanted to dispose of your tires, you could have done that at the place where you bought the tires, whether it is Walmart or wherever it is, and you could have left it there. But also, you could have taken it yourself in your vehicle to a recycling plant. And how it works is that when you take your vehicle to this recycling plant, they weigh your vehicle. And when you are coming back out, they weigh your vehicle. And the difference in terms of what you would have left at the recycling plant, they charge you for that. So it's a very efficient system. And I'm indicating as well, I think the time has come for us to ensure that we have compliance with the law. Madam Speaker, if you look at what is happening in terms of the regional corporations, you have a lot of these persons who go around, even in terms of litter warden type of persons, the assistants. But the question is, you pass back and you see these things are unattended to. And what is happening? How effective it is. And one of the reasons why it is not very effective is that people are not brought to justice. They are not being charged properly. And action is not being taken against them consistently. Madam Speaker, I want to also give another suggestion. It is not a novel suggestion, but when you look around the world, you will see that a lot of cement factories, and I have the examples of some of them here from the United States, a whole list of cement factories which I have and I have researched, they use disposed tires to fire their kiln. We have Trinidad Cement Limited here, and I know for a fact that this discussion has taken place many years ago, but never materialized. Why is it not possible as well so that we can save on our fossil fuels? We could save in terms of this whole aspect of diversifying the economy. We could save valuable foreign exchange. We could look at the opportunity cost of not using natural gas to fire these kilns, but use the tires, the discarded tires, to assist in that regard. So I think in addition to the kilns and so on, I think it's important for us to examine what are the opportunities that are available to persons who would like to get into some kind of industry. I think it is important for us to ask some very important questions. Madam Speaker, for 4 decades, Trinidad and Tobago has been plagued with this perennial problem of illegal and indiscriminate dumping of used tires. And I want to just say, rather than, and you know, it is easy to be accused of scoring cheap political points, but the truth is, and the facts are, that the only time that we had the introduction of tire shredders was under the People's Partnership Government in 2014. And they were installed and commissioned, and they are very important in terms of the environmental upkeep. And I want to ask the questions again. Should we therefore be discussing investment incentives instead of a tax on tires? Madam Speaker, as I indicated earlier on, it seems as though that we have forgotten the characteristics of a good tax system. And that should be, and I want to give you 5 qualities that a good tax system is supposed to have so that it will be applicable but also acceptable. It should be the principle of fairness. And when we look at this tire tax from 5 to 30%, we ask the question, is it a fair tax? It must have adequacy. It must have simplicity. It must have transparency. And it must have administrative ease. And Madam Speaker, I want to submit today and to this House that it doesn't seem as though that we are very clear. Not even the Customs and Excise Department that has to collect this money is very clear from my investigation. And the persons are sometimes believing that when you pay this $20 to the Customs and for the importation of tax, you still have to pay at the tire shop. And therefore, there must be very clear and specific and unambiguous guidelines as to how you dispose of these tires. Madam Speaker, apart from the fact that we can use these, when you shred the tires, the question is, so you shred the tires, and what are you going to do about it? I just indicated it is very unfortunate that to the entrance of our city, just walking distance from the main street, you have thousands of tires that are accumulating water and festering mosquitoes in a place that we say we should be very concerned about. But the question about it is that what can we do with what has been shredded? And Madam Speaker, I'm sure it might impress a lot of us to know that what is referred to as the rubber crumb can be used in so many ways. It can be used in sports services and safety mats for children's playground. We also be told that it can be used in equestrian training surfaces and arenas. It can be used as carpet underlay. It can be used for high-performing running tracks and sports pitches. It can be used, in fact, as rubberized asphalt for road surfaces. And the research that I've done indicate that where the rubber crumbs are mixed, in a sense, or where it is mixed with bitumen, that the sound that comes out of that when vehicles run on it is less than if you didn't have it, if you had the pure asphalt. We have seen a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where people are clamoring. In fact, as members of parliament, we'll all tell you that people come to us often and frequently and ask us whether we can assist them in putting road humps in areas where people speed. Madam Speaker, I think it's an opportunity for the government to consider. When you shred these tires, why can't you mold them into road humps so you don't have to expense yourself in terms of concrete and other things? So look, why don't we use the business? I think the member from Maloney, Aruka Maloney was saying that my colleague talks a lot of business. Well, we're giving you ample business opportunities. Madam Speaker, I want to just conclude on this aspect of it because I want to get on to another aspect of my contribution, which has to deal with that of the hybrid, the electric cars, and the CNG. Madam Speaker, prior to now, we would have heard about certain fiscal incentives for persons to utilize CNG, electric vehicles, and also the hybrid vehicles. And the hybrid vehicle really, hybrid means a combination of the CNG and also in terms of the gas or in terms of the electricity. Now, people are proposing that these vehicles are very important, they're very useful, and they could be very economical. But the question we have to ask ourselves now is that now that the Minister of Finance on the 2nd of October 2017 indicated in his presentation that there were certain fiscal incentives to attract persons to use these types of vehicles, the primary reason for doing this was to, in a sense, reduce the dependence on this high fuel subsidy. And again, I asked a question in this very house a few days ago of the Minister of Energy who was here, and I asked him to tell us and to tell the country how many CNG fuel stations are available for use now, and how many did you propose to construct? The Minister of Finance gave us a figure in the budget speech, and indicated that there was supposed to be about 75 more to be constructed and to be utilized. And the question one has to ask oneself is, prior to now, prior to today, because he did say, and I have the amendment that he has circulated, he has now, in a sense, removed one of the items from the bill, which indicates that you're now going to have commercial vehicles. He says it was an oversight. He did not have the commercial vehicles. And therefore, what is going to happen is you're going to have the private vehicles, which will now be increased by the amount of the commercial vehicles. And Madam Speaker, the question we have to ask ourselves as well. You said that the incentive that you had some certain fiscal incentives for people who want to use CNG, who want to use hybrid vehicles and so on. And you said that today, in your contribution, maybe I'm subject to your correction, that you omitted inadvertently to increase, to have the commercial vehicles.
Giving way, let me explain. When we introduced the measures last year with respect to hybrid vehicles, it was for all types of vehicles. When we did the provisional collection of taxes order this year, on the 23rd of October, it interfered with the incentives for commercial vehicles that was already in place. So we're simply correcting an administrative issue that was arisen.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister of Finance. But it does not deny the question that one has to ask is whether you have adequate facilities for the refueling stations for CNG. It does not deny the question whether if you have electric vehicles, whether you have sufficient outlets, stations with these power packs. It does not deny the question. You see, it is one thing for you to be saying that, and that's one of the problems we have on this side. You come and you say these things and you lay on the table different fiscal incentives, but you do not have the infrastructure in place to satisfy the need. I'll give you away because you was my boss at one time.
Yes. And you were my employee, and you were a good employee. You were a good fellow. You were a good fellow. So thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the concessions for hybrid vehicles, CNG vehicles, and electric-powered vehicles were already in place before this government came into office in September 2015. We simply modified them. So these issues about whether there were stations and electric charging ports are applicable to the pre-2015 era as they are now.
Madam Speaker, oh sorry.
Speaker is now spent. You entitled to 15 more minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, you get the usual spin. In fact, I remember the member for Diego Martin Northeast, indicating, and he coined that phrase here that it is very familiar around the world, the expert syndrome. And therefore, I remember what you said. But I want to say again, I want to make the point, Madam Speaker. If we have so many hundreds of thousands of vehicles, if you want to incentivize and attract people to move away from this fossil fuel gas, whether it's diesel and whatever have you, and super and premium, and you want to attract them into other areas of fuel and economy fuel, that is, or fuel economy in terms of their vehicles, you must provide the facilities for them. Is it not going to be a question for someone who's driving a vehicle and going into a long-haul drive and to not find out whether at the end of that journey there's no refueling station or there's no power pack? So, and again, we know for a fact that this did not start under this administration. But the fact is that you are in charge now and you have to deal with it. Madam Speaker, as I'm speaking about and I'm talking about CNG, I want to take this opportunity really to commend and to congratulate the National Energy Skills Center. Together with the NGC, they are in a partnership in terms of the CNG, NGC. And that company was formed under the previous, our administration. And we are very proud of the fact that we were able to initiate it and to continue contributing to it. I think it's important for the country to note some of the data and the statistics. CNG engine fundamental programs began in 2015, and that is at the National Energy Skills Center. And so far, Madam Speaker, since that program commenced in May 2015 to current date, we have, NESC has graduated over 57 persons. The program really goes into a number of areas, important initiatives, for example, customized CNG installation program, the CNG installation program, the CNG inspection program. And I think what is important for us to understand so that people will have, again, in terms of the quality of the technical expertise of nationals, and again, this is in terms of the NESC and the CNG project with NGC, that one of the modules deal directly with biofuel and dual fuel systems. As a matter of fact as well, customized CNG installation program, and I know that there's an incentive to attract people in terms of the conversion kit. And again, that is something that was spoken of by the Honorable Minister of Finance. I think it's important for us to indicate as well some of the aspects of the CNG installation program, because many people will tell you that they are scared about this CNG with a tank in the trunk, and they have had instances where people have been have accidents where somebody hits them from behind, and there were experiences in other places where the tank has exploded. So people have that fear, and I think it's important for us to allay the fears of people, to let them know that the technical competence and training, the quality of the training of our nationals is such that they must be able to confidently drive their vehicles, but to know as well that we have the expertise resident right here in Trinidad and Tobago to repair and to maintain these vehicles. So Module 4, for example, in the CNG installation program, comprises diagnose complex faults in CNG fuel systems. Module 5, install CNG fuel storage and distribution systems. Module 6, install electrical control system, and so on. Thank you very much.
Members, it's now 4:30. We shall now suspend for tea, and we return at 5 o'clock. This House is now suspended.